Harvey McLeod. I'm a professional engineer. My background, I have over 40 years in the mining business, working with mines and tailing dams all around the world in over 25 countries in all types of climatic and physiographic and social conditions. My background is a bachelor's in geological engineering and master's in soil mechanics. And currently in the last probably 5 or 10 years, I'm with the International Commission of Large Dams and chairman of the tailing subcommittee, which looks at good practice guidance for tailing dams around the world. Risk assessment is the process of identifying problems and what can go wrong. And it's an important element in everything we do. We all do risk assessments when we wake up in the morning or when we step across the street. So understanding your risk and what the problems are is an important part of the risk assessment. And it affects all of our life, and in the mining companies it affects the social component with respect to having the social license to operate. It affects financial components for raising money and people at the risk of mining. The recent failures we've had with the San Marco and with Mount Poly highlight both to the mining companies and to the public and regulators that there is risk with mining, and it's understanding those risks and managing those risks, which is the important component that we want to stress in our conference. Well, it's mentioned before, if you don't know you have a problem, you're not going to manage it. And the process of risk assessment, it's really getting everybody to think about what could go wrong. Because if you have some ideas about what could go wrong, then you can start implementing both management practices to manage the risk, but also engineering or design or other procedures which will reduce the likelihood of something happening or the consequence of something happening. It's important to illustrate that risk is really a combination of two things. It's the likelihood that something will happen, and it's the consequence. And it's important to think of those two considerations, because sometimes you can reduce the likelihood of happening by not getting out of bed and never stepping in front of a car, for example, or the consequence by having airbags and safety systems. Well, I think you'll see too with these recent failures, there's been a large drop in the equity of the companies that failure was associated with. And I think moving forward, you're going to see financing and shareholders saying, well, wait a minute, if I'm going to invest my money in this company, what are the risks? And likewise with insurance companies, is there, traditionally insurance companies haven't focused on, for example, a tailings dam failure, and are we insuring for that? It's been more of a global, we provide insurance policy for mine. And certainly after the Omai and Los Frailes tailing failures, which happened in the late 90s, insurance companies started looking at, well, should we have different systems for mining companies? And I think after these two recent failures, again, it'll probably come under scrutiny from insurance companies as to how are they structuring their premiums and insurance requirements for the companies. Well, there's two components here, and I say risk and resilience. The risk, as I talked about, it's the likelihood or consequence of something happening. And there's a lot of different techniques and methodologies for identifying risk, and they vary from very simple ones where you're looking at failure modes and effects to very complex probabilistic systems that they would use, say, for NASA. So there's a lot of different tools, but that's just the risk assessment. The resilience part, and that's been a big part of my life, my career, is designing systems that are resilient. They're more robust. They're less likely to fail, or if something does happen, the consequence is less. So I think it's getting into the mindset of practitioners, engineers, operators, of building more resilience into a system, so that even if something does happen, the consequences would be less, and you're building in systems to reduce the likelihood that something may happen. Well, it can benefit the whole industry. As I mentioned, with mining at a corporate level, senior corporate level, CFOs and CEOs, it's understanding what tools are out there for assessing risk. It's getting the interaction with practitioners, with regulators, with financial people in terms of, well, how can we be managing our risk? Certainly after these failures, a large part of some of our business are people saying, well, are our dams at risk of failing? what risk systems do we have in place? How can they be strengthened? So at a corporate level, it's important for managing the shareholders and corporate aspects. Insurance companies, it's important for if they are going to be facing large claims and insurance claims, for example, how are they going to structure premiums in the future, and what is their approach to risk assessment? So I think for them to understand both the technical components of different things that can go wrong with facilities, as well as tools and methodologies, will benefit them. Regulators, their job is to protect the public, and so they want to know what tools are available to help protect that. And likewise with the social side, it's the same. The community wants to know, First Nations want to know, well, when someone says something is a risk, what does that mean to them? How do you communicate that, and how do you quantify it and put it into terms that the public can understand? And lastly, for practitioners, a big part of our business, we're always looking at moving our state of practice forward. And so a conference like this, where you're sharing experiences with risk assessments among your peers and amongst other professionals in different areas, is an important part in just building the state of practice for risk assessment and for better management, both governance and design of tailings and mining facilities.